Perfect. Hi, everybody. I want to welcome everybody today to the Carillon Conversations. I'm Dr. Carolina Pataki here at the Carillon. I have my private practice here, Love Discovery Institute. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, sexologist, certified sex therapist, and I've also trained with some of the top researchers in relationships, such as the Gottmans, Imagos, just to name a couple. And what really led me to my work is my quest for really wanting to understand love and relationships. I had been through my own process, both academically and personally, as it was in my very own story that goes back to the very core foundation of my childhood, one that laid out the foundational building blocks from which I learned what love and intimacy look like. However, this foundation lacked the sufficient ingredients from which even my parents' relationship did not succeed. And later in grad school, while studying marriage and family therapy, and after two tumultuous failed relationships, I identified that I was stuck in similar dysfunctional romantic relationship patterns. And so I began seeing a psychoanalyst on a weekly basis. And at the same time, I began trying to understand what I'd learned about the theory surrounding intimacy, love, and relationships, and applying it to myself and my romantic life during that time, and then bringing that material back into that therapy process. So during this period, my romantic life had become my love life's laboratory and research. The work entailed rigorous self-exploration through the process. And over time, I was able to start merging what I had been studying academically with my continued personal therapy work. And that led me to a greater understanding of how I was showing up in my own relationship, and even more so how I needed to actually show up for myself. So, in the way that I showed up, it was pretty much starting to align cognitively and emotionally. So bringing those two into congruence with what I wanted to have in my life. And this process was the one that brought me to my life partner, Max, to also be challenged in a whole different way as well, and one that led to his own personal quest and questioning. And so over time, we slowly realized that although things from our past may still come up from time to time, our past no longer needs to keep us from this intimate, loving, connected relationship. And this led us to conscious partnership, as well as co-creating in many ways. And as we've been teaching others the tools to a conscious relationship. So I wanted to definitely share with all of you a little bit of my story and how it connects to conscious relationships, since this is what I'll be talking about today. So I'd like to first, as we go into conscious relationships, help all of you understand a little bit of the different facets around intimacy. So we have social intimacy, and this is where couples connect by sharing some of the same friends or even some of their family members, where they enjoy each other's family members and they connect in those social aspects. We also have intellectual intimacy, and this is maybe like a couple like the Clintons, where maybe they like to talk about politics, or they find a common interest that becomes intellectually stimulating, where they also connect. There's also spiritual intimacy, where, and this is couples that connect in spiritual areas of their life, where they share some of the same beliefs around even existential beliefs. It doesn't necessarily have to be religious, even though for some couples it is. Then we have physical intimacy, which isn't quite necessarily sexual intimacy, but for those couples that do enjoy holding hands, cuddling, and nurturing their affection and their physical intimacy. They like to be close um, for a variety of time. So there's also sexual intimacy, and this is more around sharing the erotic life together, as well as then finally we have emotional intimacy, which is the core of these various facets to intimacy. And so emotional intimacy is the one that I find couples have most difficulty with. This is usually the one that really brings couples to therapy, or even individuals, even though they may find, I may find sometimes couples saying, well, we stopped having sex. And so now we think that there's something wrong or going on in our relationship. But when we really start exploring, it really goes back to this emotional component that they don't know how to necessarily work through. While some other couples may find that they could be comfortably going through their couple's life, connecting at some of these other facets. Some of these couples that really enjoy being active together, and have big social groups, and they're always coming together with other people, or couples that maybe find themselves going to church together, and that's what brings them together, and maybe they're not necessarily having to deepen that connection at the emotional level because they're comfortable where they're at. However, through different couples life stages, sometimes what what comes up and what resurfaces is some of that emotional intimacy that is not being met. So so often, this is what brings couples to therapy, but it's also
Okay.
a
Okay.
component
I'll see you a
to
little bit.
intimacy,
Okay.
where intimacy is, some of you might have heard, is another way to think about it is into me you see. Intimacy, being able to fully be comfortable with your innermost self and being able to share that with another. So in these aspects of the emotional part, this takes us back to some of our family dynamics, some of our childhood wounds. And so, for that reason, though, a conscious relationship, entering a conscious relationship, gets created through purposefulness, decisively, and with intention. So you could grow as you enter into a space between of the self and another, for the discovery of the self and the other in that relationship. And so you learn to begin to share your inner worlds together in oscillation, and connection, and the self and the other. And this requires it requires clarity. It requires awareness of the self, and by this, this means where, um, you know what love looks like for you, what it feels like for you. You learn how to receive love, so you learn how to be able to express and give love as well, and how to communicate this love. So for that, you need to learn about your family system, which is the first place where we learn what love looks like and feels like. It's through, I want to say, it's your parents that are your first, your primary caregivers that are those first romantic love that you have in your life as a baby, as a child. And so, through understanding some of the boundaries that you did or did not have when in your younger years, as you learn some of your childhood wounds, which we all carry, which then connect us to understanding our childhood unmet needs. And where this comes from is really, um, Our parents, because parents cannot give what they do not have. And so, if their emotional needs have not been met by the time they have children, it will be very difficult for them to meet their children's emotional needs. And oftentimes, this requires a whole great deal of awareness, self awareness to understand that. Plus, children need so much, right? And because of that, what happens is, for example, we have our frontal lobe, which is our rational part of our brain, but we also have our primal brain, which is the emotional part of our brain. And so when we're children and our parents maybe haven't been able to meet our needs, for example, if you grew up in a household where with a single parent, let's say, and mom was always working and never around. And so in your rational brain, you tell yourself, well, mom gave me everything. She worked so hard. But as we go into exploring it in the process of therapy, we start identifying the primal brain, that starts allowing you to connect to what that experience really felt like for you. And this is where I see individuals often struggle between allowing themselves to feel maybe the loneliness that they experienced, or the neglect or the abandonment, um, when they go into letting themselves or giving themselves permission to actually feel. They instead go into wanting to protect mom. And so they'll say, but no, like, mom was working so hard. She gave me everything. And that's okay. We don't want to take that away from mom. But what we have to understand, for to have a conscious relationship, is we have to start understanding what we actually felt during that time. So we're able to then identify those childhood unmet needs that show up later in your romantic relationship with your partner later on in life. And so when this shows up later on with your partner, this is where individuals find what we call triggers, okay, where they're being triggered by this partner because this partner isn't giving them, isn't making them happy, and isn't filling their needs. And what often individuals can't see when they haven't been able to work through the identifying this with the parent, then they're in some ways disconnected on levels of awareness where they're continuing to make it about what the partner can't give them. And so I often say, to couples or individuals that I work with, that it's learning to identify the ghost, right? And the ghost becomes the parent in your present romantic relationship, where you're reacting to, when you're reacting and when you're being triggered, you're actually reacting to your parent, the anger of what they didn't give you back then, as you're reacting to the here and now of your partner. But it's not your partner's responsibility to meet those needs. And so this is where the work entails awareness and understanding of the reparenting process of how do I now start meeting my needs so I could show up differently with my partner, and start being able to say to my partner, hey, I'm feeling this way when. And what I'm needing from you is, and letting go of that control, because it's not your partner's responsibility to meet your needs. So as you can see, love requires choice, and it's the choice of being able to choose you, of learning how to love yourself, choosing you over the parent in that moment when it's the primal brain taking you back to that time in life, so you could really start understanding yourself better and start understanding how to love yourself in a different way and fill that tank of the unmet needs. So what a conscious relationship is, it becomes, you need to become aware of your hidden purpose of your relationship, the entering into the emotional adulting process, as I tell my clients, most of us walking around are grown-ups. We grew up. We we forgot about our inner child, and that our inner child got stuck emotionally at 5, 7, 8 years of age, sometimes as a teenager. And so as we emotionally got stuck, we kind of continued with these ideas of, when I grow up, I'm gonna have I'm going to get married, a white picket fence. I'm going to be the boss at work. I'm going to buy a bigger house. Like all these things of, like, when I grow up, without necessarily looking inward, and saying, wait a minute, where are my unmet needs, and what do I need to emotionally adult and enter in that reparenting process? So we also start seeing, when we enter this process, we also start seeing our partner more clearly for who they are. So, someone else like yourself that may be struggling on their own with their own inner child, and not the person responsible for your happiness. It takes responsibility for you to connect to what you're needing, and understand your unmet needs. You also become more intentional in your interaction, and you're more open, and so you're able to be in that in that connection, and in that space with your partner, when you become more intentional. Um, a conscious relationship also requires for you to embrace your shadow self. These are the aspects of yourself that you perhaps do not like, or are conflicted with, or reject. So in learning how to have that self-compassion for yourself, you also learn to value and accept yourself. And and we also must, when we have a conscious relationship, we must abandon the self-defeating tactics and beliefs surrounding relationships that we once had. We must change our ideas about love, relationships, about our partner, and about ourselves. And so, to perhaps understand a little bit more, in contrast to the conscious relationship, let's talk a little bit about unconscious relationships. And so I find that unconscious relationships come from this idea that we've been kind of told love is. So a lot of times when I have an individual that says to me, I don't know if I want to stay in this relationship. I fell out of love. I think I fell out of love. Okay. Like for me, that idea in itself, that language, is a part of what leads to understanding that there's something unconscious about that relationship, where we're confusing in some ways the butterflies and the chemicals, such as oxytocin, and endorphins that run in those first 6 months to a year of the first parts of the relationship, is what love is. But that's still in the fantasy part, which Hollywood has done a great job at feeding us, the fantasy of love versus what love actually is, which I had, as I mentioned earlier on, is a choice. And so this fantasy of love in unconscious relationships is that one of, it's someone else's job to make me happy. And from that place, we're also stuck in certain social constructs without questioning them. And so in those social constructs, it's almost like we're mechanically checking the boxes of what's next. We're driven by the labels, not so much the journey of getting to know ourselves, nor our partner. From that place, we want these labels. So we start dating somebody, and we quickly really need that safety of, like, you need to be my boyfriend or my girlfriend. Then as soon as we get to that level, now we're not necessarily feeling very happy with that level, because now we're like, okay, when are we going to get engaged? When are we going to move in together? And then following into, now when are we going to get married? And so if that unfulfillment creeps up again, now we're like, okay, now we need to have kids. And so it just continues on in this unconscious relationship as we're trying to find a sense of fulfillment without questioning. And often in this place, we're dismissing the understanding of life partnership, of the journey that it entails of discovering oneself and being able to turn inward and say, if I'm not feeling fulfilled, what is going on within me? Where is this feeling coming from? When was the last time that I felt so unfulfilled? Or what did it look like the last time that I felt so unfulfilled? Perhaps in my childhood. So in this unconscious relationship, you're not questioning your journey. You're focused on the next stage. You react also without thinking. And this is characterized by the old brain reactivity. In an unconscious relationship, we also look to our partner for external validation and to continue to make us happy. We come into our relationship with these ideas, expectations, and I always tell my clients expectations really are a killer of relationships. The shoulds, when you find yourself saying, well, he should or she should know about our partner, this isn't allowing you to fully connect with them, as opposed to allowing yourself to be transparent and intimate. And when we're in an unconscious relationship, we're also running on survival. It's a part of the idea of attraction to begin with, and what chemistry is, which is basically what chemistry is. We tend to think of it as when we meet somebody and we're like, I don't know what it is about this person, but I can't get them off my mind. I can't get enough of them. And so we make it like we think it's about looks, but it runs deeper than that. It's actually our subconscious tapping into that this person is really familiar. This person's going to take you back to that same feeling that you had in the living room when you were with your primary caregivers, which is the reason that over the 6 months or over the year, you start getting really triggered and uncomfortable with that person. And so that's a beautiful time to actually start working on yourself or start working as a couple. So these ideas around attraction are something that goes back to that fantasy. And so what happens when we're running on survival, and one of the things that I often like to show people, and I just printed it up quickly to show it to everybody, instead of being able to have it up on the screen. So you guys will excuse me for that. But it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I like to explain it in such a way so you start understanding where we are sometimes flipping the chart and really going back through different stages of the couple stage, whether it's before we get into that couple stage, if we're dating and we find ourselves in a lot of anxiety while we're dating, or perhaps we don't feel the anxiety while we're dating, but perhaps that anxiety comes up later once you're well settled in and married, maybe having your first child. So when you start feeling the most anxiety, it's because in this Maslow hierarchy of needs, it's basically getting inverted. So what Maslow hierarchy of needs is, it's a motivational theory in psychology that's comprising of this 5-tier model of human needs, and it's often shown as a hierarchical levels within a pyramid. And so from the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just maybe, and hopefully you guys can see it well here. So at the very bottom, we have the basic needs, which is the shelter, food, water, just our basic needs. And so as we move up this chart, we then have our safety needs. Okay. And in our safety needs, it's also a part of where when we didn't feel safe, right? So going back to that example earlier on that I talked about, if mom was working a lot of hours and you were left alone, most likely there were times that you didn't feel safe when you were feeling lonely and you didn't have somebody to really check in on you and explain things to you and validate your feelings during that time. So when we don't feel safe, we end up with a fracture here in love and relationships and intimacy. And so as we continue to move up this chart now with belonging and love needs, intimate relationships, and so forth, now with the fracture, we're going up this pyramid with creating some sense of pseudo relationships where we're not allowing ourselves to fully be seen. So when we're creating pseudo relationships, we'll be a lot more comfortable in the other facets of intimacy that I described earlier on, such as we'll focus on the social intimacy, we'll focus on the sexual intimacy, we'll focus on the intellectual intimacy, without necessarily allowing ourselves to go into that emotional space of vulnerability, because it's really scary because we have a fracture that we think we're moving up this chart. And so in this chart, the following being esteem needs, right? So self-esteem. And in esteem needs, we're 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 trying to feel better through our romantic relationship. So this is where we're wanting our partner to make us feel happy, and whenever they don't, we're so incredibly hurt as we're making them responsible for our own happiness. And so we think we're continuing to go up as the grown-up self, the pseudo self esteem and the pseudo self actualization, where now through the pseudo self actualization, this may be the person that's like the big CEO, being able to have a lot of degrees, being able to have the big home, and so here you think you're self actualized, and a lot of times I get a lot of midlifers that end up coming to me as all of a sudden they think they've reached, everything, checking off all the boxes that society ever told them that they needed to check off to be able to be fully self-actualized and feel happy. However, all of a sudden, as they've checked off all the boxes, this gets inverted and this drops, okay, and they go right back to, okay, feeling really anxious, feeling really unsafe, okay, and this is where we start doing a lot of the work and the process in therapy of being able to go back and revisit these times to understand, and start adulting, emotionally adulting this inner child and the reparenting process, which allows us to step into a very conscious relationship where we feel connected with our partner. We're able to share with our partner a better understanding of ourselves as we've connected the dots to our puzzle, and so we're able to have a more authentic relationship, we're being able to respond to our partner instead of reacting to them. We're able to hold ourselves accountable for verbalizing to our partner these ideas that we have, or these feelings that come up for us, or some of our needs that we have. So all these are aspects of a conscious relationship. Part of an illusion of love and relationships, we must look outside of ourselves for the cause of the problem. A lot of times, like I said, it's this fracture that happens very early in life, that we continue thinking that we could go up this Maslow's chart and hierarchy of needs without ever having to look back. But eventually, at some point in that stage, whether it's through your dating stage, at the very beginning of your relationship, after our first child, or when our last child left to college, where we all of a sudden rekindle and connect to that child. And this is again like where the work begins. So part of the illusion of love in relationships is that we think if the person did X, then we would be happy. If part of these Hollywood stories too, that infiltrate the way that you want your relationship to look like. So when we start recognizing all these things, we're able to now start consciously choosing, understanding ourselves better, and connecting with our partner at a deeper level. And so I'm checking the time. I'm noticing that it's 4:30. And so to start wrapping up, again, I want to thank everybody for your time today. I don't know if there's any questions that, if we still have time for maybe just a couple of minutes for any questions that have come up. Okay. Okay. And if not, then and if not, like, please feel free to reach out. You could find me at lovediscovery.org. You could find me also at the Carillon website. And also, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, either at the Love Discovery Institute or also under carolinapataki.com. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And once again, thank you also to the Carillon.